Now that we have our fragrance all measured out, let's now start weighing out our waxes to add to our melting pot and then get it melting. So turn your scale on. Make sure that you're using the right units of measurement. So this scale can measure in grams and ounces. So I want to make sure that I hit the mode button to make sure that I'm measuring in grams, because that's my choice of measurement. If you'd like to use ounces, then you just go ahead and change your scale to ounces using the mode button. Always make sure it's at 0, and that means that the scale is tiered. Now I'm going to first add my universal additive, and if you look at this label here, it tells you, it's a bit worn out, but what it says is that it says 0.01 to 1% for container candles and 10% with GW416, G for tarts, and then pour at 82 degrees. So GW16 is just a different type of soy wax. It doesn't have any additives and things like that in it. And then it just comes in a bag, and it's literally just a white granules. There's nothing fancy about its appearance. And remembering that we're going to be using 120 grams of wax, so we're going to want between 10 to 12 grams of universal additive to this. So again, make sure your scale's on, that it's tiered to 0, and then just start adding your universal additive. You can see it's just a powder that goes in, basically. I'll just shake mine in slowly. There we go. 10 grams. 9, 10. That's close enough. The beauty of soy wax melts is that it's not like formulating skincare products where you have to be really precise. There's room for give. So now I'm just going to, again, make sure my scale is turned on. I've got a scoop of wax here, and I'm going to be measuring out 120 grams of wax. Now these numbers can sneak up on you pretty quick, so just keep that in mind as you're dumping. You don't want to be pouring back. See, 122 grams, that's close enough. You don't want to be pouring back in when you've got the universal additive in there already. So just watch your numbers as you're pouring, and don't be too worried about a gram or two over. That's really not a big deal. Now that we've got our wax and our universal additive weighed into here, we're going to take it now and show you how to melt it. Now there's a couple different ways that we can melt the wax. So if you're using a jug like this, which I don't recommend just because I find them really limiting, and you can't put them on a hot plate or a stove to melt any wax. You are confined only to using a microwave, which I don't recommend doing with your wax because you don't have as much control over how the wax melts, because you'll have to do it on short bursts if you do choose to use the microwave, like 10 to 30 second bursts, and then you'll have to stir it each time. It's really a pain. I don't like using those for wax melts, and I don't use them. I always use my aluminum pouring pots. They're very durable. I've had them ever since I started making, and the only thing that I'd have to do is I wipe them out every time with paper towel, and occasionally I have to tighten the screw on the handle. That's really not a big deal. I like them because you can put them directly onto a hot plate if you have a hot plate, or you can put them into a double burner, which is simply just taking an old pot and filling it up halfway with water, or a little bit, quarter of the way. You don't want the water to like fly out of the top as you're putting the jug in, because remember that this is full of weight, so the more wax you have in here, the heavier it's going to be, and the more it's going to disperse into the water, and the water will disperse over the edges and just cause a mess. So just be careful how much water you put in here when you're making your double boiler. But yeah, that's what we'll be doing. We'll be taking this to our stove, or if you have a hot plate, use that in your studio. Fill this full with water. Place the jug inside, remembering that we only have a little bit of wax, so we're not going to want to put too much water in here, because otherwise the jug will be doing this. And I'll just show you that right now. I'll demo the difference between having too much water in here and what it will actually do. Okay, I'm in my kitchen now, and I filled up my pot of water, and you can see that it's just above halfway full. And I'm going to show you what happens to the jug as I put this in here. Look, it just falls over because there is not enough weight in the jug, And if this was heavier and I pushed down, like if it had more wax in it, it would disperse the water up. And see how it's almost overfilling and spilling everywhere? So we don't want too much water in our pot. Let's pour some out and then I'll show you again. I've poured some out, so now it's about a quarter of the way full. I'm putting my jug in. You can see how it's kind of floating on top, but it isn't knocking it over like this. This, or even a little bit less water, is the perfect amount. You kind of don't want it to float, but it's got to be at just the right level, just for the amount of wax. And obviously, the more wax you have in here, the less likely you're going to have this issue where the jug's floating around and things like that and tipping over. But it's just something to be aware of as you're going along. Over at the stove now, I'm going to choose this burner right here to use as opposed to this one, just because of how large this pot is, to heat the water up a bit quicker. And then I'm going to go get my thermometer. I've lit my stove now, and I don't want it on the highest heat because it will really melt the wax up really fast. So about medium heat, and then I'm going to keep an eye on this as it's melting, and make sure that you have your thermometer nearby. You can see that the wax is pretty melted now. It's perfect, 85 degrees, that's what we want. So let's turn this stove off now. Take the pot off the heat. Okay, take it out of the hot water. It's hard for me to talk when that thing's bubbling, you can't hear me. Just take the temperature again. Okay, 91, that's okay. That's good. We're gonna go back to our workbench now with it. One of the reasons why we want to get it to 85 degrees is because the palm stearic acid, or the universal additive, must melt at a higher temperature. See, it's at 80 now, so this is perfect temperature. You want to melt it to around 85 to 90 degrees, and if it's a bit warmer, you just let it sit out a bit and then you can carry on with the procedure. So let's add our fragrance now, which you just simply pour it in. Nothing more to it than that. Just put it aside on a paper towel because it could drip and then just make a mess of everywhere. And then, right, you just want to stir it. Stir it in really well. And okay, do you see how on the bottom of this, it started to solidify when I put the, when I added the fragrance, and then it started to solidify at the bottom there? Don't panic about that at all. This is why we have a heat gun nearby, right here, and we're just going to melt it and then keep stirring again. So I'm just going to pause, and it's going to be noisy just for a second. What I'm doing is I'm tipping the pot on its side and hitting right along here where there's just a bit of the melted wax on the bottom. And this is just because of the temperature of the fragrance oil. When I added it to the wax, it was just a bit colder. It's really nothing to panic about. And I'm just going to show you how to do that right now. It's just going to be noisy again for a moment. Your heat gun handy because you never know when we're going to need it again, and if that starts happening again where it starts to solidify, you just heat gun it and carry on. So let's check our temperature again because we want to make sure that it's not too hot. 61, it's a good temperature. We need to pour it into the molds when it is about 65, 60-ish. Now, if we do it too hot, it's just going to melt all over the place. And I'll actually show you in a minute what happens when the wax is too hot. Now, if I just wanted to make a plain wax mount, I would simply just pour this straight into this container right now. But it wouldn't have any color in it. So let's add some candle dyes.